public can also contact staff during normal business hours. We also welcome written comment. Ms. Boyd, do we have any members?
So
Public members?
I do have one comment from Teresa Schimmels online. She's one of our pro tem commissioners, and she said, I'd like to thank Jim Anderson for his service over the past 8 years as a physician assistant mentor or member of the board. Some of the changes we made, including the opioid rules and working on LGBTQ issues and PA rules, greatly benefited from his experience and knowledge. He'll be missed. And then she says, a big welcome to Ed Lopez. Although I don't know Ed well, he's made a great impact in the physician assistant community in the state of Washington, particularly in central Washington. He'll be a great addition to the commission.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? This concludes the public comment portion of the meeting. I want to thank you for your comments, and again, you may provide written comments at any time. So the next item on the agenda is the chair's report, and as this being my first commission meeting as chair, I'd like to first, I cannot thank all of you enough for your dedication to the medical profession and to the people of Washington State. The importance of the work that we do really cannot be overstated. Our mission is to promote patient safety and enhance the integrity of the medical profession. And hence, our work directly affects the very lives of every person in Washington State and the livelihood of every physician and physician assistant licensed in this state. So with so much at risk, we must take our work in the commission extremely seriously. We've had a lot of discussion in the past several months regarding how we want to continue to conduct our committee meetings or the commission meetings. And I think we learned quite a bit during the pandemic in terms of how we adapt to both the travel and gathering restrictions, and as well as the technologies that we learn how to optimize for our purpose. But nonetheless, we also had to really adjust to a lot of the unprecedented changes in different ways that, well, that perhaps may have affected the effectiveness of the work that we do. In the past 2.5 years, obviously, everything was put in question. All formalities were set aside to accommodate these changes. We made the best of restrictions and limited resources to ensure that our work continued. And while most of these restrictions have now been lifted, allowing a return to pre-pandemic protocols, the pandemic is far from over, and we know we have to stay nimble and willing to pivot rapidly. And so for that, I thank everyone here in advance for any quick changes that we may have to make in the future. I want to also mention that this is a particularly challenging year for the commission for other reasons. Because of the timing of commissioner term limits and just the way the turnovers have been timed, I've been told historically that about every 8 years that we have a turnover of 7 members. Typically, the replacement of these members are spread out over the year. This year, as again have been told, never in the history of the commission have we had such a large number replaced at once. I think we all, as professional and professionals and human beings and colleagues, it's hard to see so many of our colleagues being, quote, replaced. Of course, you can never be replaced, but I think from not just a procedural perspective, but also from an emotional perspective, it's difficult for all of us to see such changes. And the facts are, though, that as soon as a commissioner is officially replaced, they are no longer a voting member at the business meeting this morning. So you might notice that we have an unusually large number of absences because so many commissioners became ineligible at the same time before the newly appointed commissioners were ready to take their places. So we did do our best before this meeting to invite and encourage some of our newer members who I'd like to introduce here in a minute. And but nonetheless, some of these members who have become ineligible became ineligible without the opportunity to attend their intended final meeting to say goodbye. And I think normally if we had the opportunity to say goodbye to the commissioners whose this would have been their last meeting, I think we would have had the opportunity to have them present themselves, say goodbye to us with a nice farewell. But nonetheless, I think we have not been able to do that. And I just want to call out some of the members who are not here today. So some of these members will continue on as pro temps, and they will continue to participate in the case review meetings. They're certainly welcome to in this meeting as a non-voting member, but I think most of these folks we probably won't see again. First commissioner or past commissioner I want to recognize is Dr. Robert Small. Dr. Small has had an unusual history with the commission because he was actually a pro temp before becoming a full commissioner. So he served the 8 years as full commissioner and then was not eligible to become a pro temp, and therefore when he received the notice from the governor's office that his position had to be replaced, he instantaneously became ineligible to continue as commissioner, which logistically became very difficult for our legal staff because they had to reassign all of his cases during his work to other commissioners. But also, again, from a collegial perspective, I think it was a bit of a shock. We knew it was coming, we just didn't know when. So he was planning to at least call into some of the meetings during this weekend, but he was unable to do so. He did send a people which I'd like to know. Late last week, a new commissioner was appointed to the position that I've been in, which ended my tenure as a commissioner a bit more abruptly than planned. I have to admit that it feels a bit strange to no longer be on the commission after more than 12 years. It may take me a little while to get used to that. The time on the commission was absolutely the highlight of my years as a psychiatrist. The work was very challenging, very rewarding, and different than anything that I had done previously. The most impressive thing for me has been the dedication of all of the staff. Everyone is so committed to the mission of protecting the public. I appreciate everything that all of you do as staff and fellow commissioners, whether I have known you for many years or just a short time. I think that the Thursday case disposition meetings were probably my favorite activities with the commission, because I always found our case discussions to be so interesting and at times challenging in a good way, whether we agreed or sometimes disagreed. A few other favorite activities I was part of that come to mind are when we reviewed and approved suicide prevention courses prior to DOH implementing its list of approved courses, and when we developed the opioid prescribing rules. I think all of you, now my former fellow outstanding commissioners, and all of the incredible staff, and also our great AAG for your collegiality, support, and help. There are so many things that I could thank so many of you for individually, but I am going to refrain from doing that so that I don't inadvertently forget it. However, I do want to thank Amelia for always saving chocolate chip cookies. I will miss all of you, and I will continue to follow the commission as it. So, obviously, we'll miss Dr. Sloan as well. That he could be here in person to receive our heartfelt appreciation for his 12 years of service on the commission. And I think Stephen, within my few years on the commission, I can't think of anybody who embodies the spirit of the commission more than not to say anything less about these following individuals. Mr. John Alden is also not here today since he's no longer a voting member. Although he's a public member, he will continue 1 year as a pro tem, since he will serve as the immediate past chair as on the executive committee. Tony Borlas, also a public member, not appointed as a pro temp. I don't think Tony is here yet today. But until her position is officially replaced by the governor, she will be considered a commissioner. But again, because we don't know when that's going to happen, I just wanted to mention her as well. Dr. Alden Roberts, of course, I think everyone is familiar with him, and I can't say enough about his leadership as well. He will continue on as pro tem, which makes him eligible to serve on the committees, but again, he will not be full commissioner. Dr. Charlie Brown also has completed his term and will hopefully continue as a pro tem. He does still have a few cases in. Those of you who may not know him, if you have the opportunity to write to some point, please say hello. He is a real. Then two members who are here presently. One, Dr. Yu, who is also has completed her 8 years. She will continue to serve until her position has been replaced. And again, I mentioned her because we don't know when that's going to happen. It's going to happen before August. So highlight her. And Mr. Jim Anderson sitting in the back. It's strange to see him sitting way back there. I don't want to say, Jim, we're getting started. But want to also pay appreciation for respect and appreciation for his contributions and everything that he's taught all of us, and myself in particular, always keeping me in check and on my toes during the meetings. Thank you for that. So that concludes the chair report. All right, so the next item on our agenda. All right. I believe it's and before we go on to the next item, I just wanted to allow, thank you. Before we do that, I wanted to quickly remind everyone that Shaw, Secretary of Health, is going to be calling in at 8:30. Oh, he's going to be here, sorry. He's going to do a presentation. He'll be here at 8:30. So during our business meeting, if I abruptly stop, that's to be granted. Next items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine agency matters and will be approved by a single motion without separate discussion. If a separate discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular business agenda. Are there any items from the agenda the commissioner would like to start for discussion?
We need to pull the minutes from the consent agenda. Heather has some edits. It's just a change to a sentence that's in where we discussed the future meetings and how we would work those during a declared emergency. She wants us to change the motion sentence to the chair entertain a motion to provide virtual and call-in options to the public to attend the WMC's open public meetings during having the COVID-19 declared emergency. Because to have the public in physical attendance is not reasonably safe.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to accept the amendments to minutes from
I so move.
Do we have a second? Any discussion on the amendments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. At this point, do we have a motion to accept the rest of the consent agenda? So moved. Discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda is filed. Next item on the agenda is the new business. And this is for the approval request for the 2023 budget decision package to the legislature. For this, I will pass it over to Mike.
Good morning, commissioners. The decision detail memo, and then you've had a chance to read through that. Basically, what we're asking for this morning is an approval for this to go forward through the DOH process that then gets submitted to OF, the Office of Financial Management, the governor's office. If it's approved there, it will be part of the governor's budget, and then it has to end up in one of two other budgets, the House or the Senate budget. We, as the medical commission, will put forward one of two items for this sort of thing. It's either request legislation that could be budget neutral or request legislation that has a budget. In this case, we're going a different path, which is simply a decision package, which is another word for a budget request. And the request is that we get our spending authority increased. We have enough in our reserves to cover this. And as I say in the memo, most of these employees were added during the pandemic, so this is a rebalancing. One good example of this is the staff that we added to the licensing unit. As you saw in the presentation yesterday, that was one of the reasons we were able to increase our productivity. And as of the first, we got our numbers back. We actually increased over last fiscal year the number of licenses issued by 1,000. So it's 4,600 this last fiscal year. So we are definitely on an upward trajectory. So we're trying to make sure we can keep pace with that. The other items that are added with respect to operations are forms and records analyst, and so that person is dealing with creating a litigation hold program. If you've been around the commission for more than a month, you know that we get litigation a lot. And so Heather can provide all sorts of confidential details on who likes to sue us and why. But when that happens, we get what's called a litigation hold, where we have to preserve all the records. Since we converted to digital records, that's become a bit more of a process, and to make sure that we actually are getting things that we say we have and providing them in a useful format in a reasonable amount of time. So that's one of the reasons we're at. One odd thing that we've never requested before is funding from a different source than our fee, our support account, which is called the O2G, the health professionals account. We are asking to employ a health services consultant free, but have it funded out of something DOH 319-7, the public health and activities account. This is something that we have asked for after consulting with the budget office at DOH. This is something that is coming from the International Medical Graduates Bill 6551 in 2019 that is supposed to do grants and contracting to certain institutions to help facilitate IMGs get into the healthcare workforce through a residency. So one example would be Highline Community College has the Welcome Back Center, and they are, by all accounts, overwhelmed on the MD side of things for trying to help people navigate into the U.S. healthcare system. And so the goal is to get these people into a residency, but they have to do things like USMLE, CFMG, get recent clinical experience, and understanding what our licensure process is. So in this case would be the MD clinical experience license, which is fairly new, was launched last October. And so they have a case manager who serves all professions, and their first idea was to get a case manager to serve just the MDs to help them process it faster. So that's one example of many where this particular position will be dealing with grants, funding, contracts, soliciting donations. City of Seattle has said that they want to donate funds to this effort. And so just giving you this example to show that this is a bit of a different ask than we've ever had before. Normally everything that we ask for comes out of our own fee support things. This particular position would be supporting non-licensed individuals. It was tough to make the argument that this was in support of the recognition of the profession. And so we decided to go different route with that. Finally, we are balancing out two things. So one, Dr. Pam Kohlmeyer is a hearing examiner that works with licensing, and that was an ad that we had not had before. And then Mahi Zuru, who she very, you met her, she's a great person to talk to. She's our equity and social justice manager. So we were able to add her through a discussion with DOH when they offered those equity and social justice manager positions to every division. And their FTEs left over, so we took those. So again, this is a rebalancing. This is not adding new staff. Technically, this is an increase in our spending authority just to cover that rebalance our existing office and budgets. So with that, I'll ask for, I have a formal approval to move forward. But if there's any questions, I'd love to be able to try and address these.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Second. Any discussion or questions for Mr. Matthews? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Approved. Sorry, opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, full business committee and work group reports. Do we have any reports from the committees? Thank you. Dr. Donato.
Hello, I'm giving a report from the reduction of medical error committee. This was called the Rome Committee. We're actually changing the direction a little bit, so we're going to come up with a new name. But we had met in a couple of years, over a couple of years, and I think for the new commissioners, there is a lot of activity early on with Dr. Chung and Dr. Roberts, both surgeons. Also, I know in anesthesiology, we have the same kind of view, is that medical error occurs, right? Error is human. That's what everyone heard from the Institute of Medicine, which is now the National Academy of Medicine, many, many years ago. And the commission deals with these errors as if, like you see one in a career, 30 years. And it tends to focus on the individual. You know, as an example, medication error, you know, it happens, I mean, in my specialty, but and we have all these ways to try to deal with it. But, you know, there are a lot of system issues that are involved with there in terms of the drug labeling, the vials, constantly changing this and that. And so coming up with system approaches are important. And so there's a whole move looking at that from a medical practice perspective, just culture, root cause analyses, and non-punitive action for medical error. And we want to still focus on that. That is an issue, those are this, but we also want to look at our own internal principles and apply these principles to us as well as commissioners. And one of the things that you see, and I've been on the commission for 4 years, is there's a lot of variation. People come in with different perspectives. There are those of us who are very entrenched in the safety, patient safety perspective. Others have very little understanding of that. And so we want to focus on things such as we're starting to do now, which is like the CMT process, where you know, to have less variation. Because a lot of us do get these cases that we view them and we say, how in the world did that come through? When you look at what was there, in particular, such as things like lack of information, we're not supposed to authorize a case or open the case to get more information. You need the information and evaluate it. So we're also looking at things such as our case reviews. There's variation in use of settlement conferences as well. And we were also wanted to look, and there's a whole movement that, again, has been around a long time. It's claim resolution process, big centers, big malpractice insurance companies use this. I think ARC had funding for this a number of years ago. And Tom Gallagher is at the University of Washington in internal medicine, had probably 10 years of ARC funding before this and put together this process. And a number of us had gone to see it maybe, what, four or 5 years ago, the process. But we were thinking of, for instance, getting questions that they are looking for in that process that we might be able to help use in our reviews. Patients. So anyway, we're kind of excited. We could use volunteers if anyone has an interest in this sort of patient safety and how we view things. And that's kind of what I want to report.
Thank you, Dr. Domino. And for the rest of the commission, if you haven't noticed, my first action as commission chair was to appoint Dr. as chair of the WMC committee. There we go. And as she mentioned, we'll probably work on changing the name of that to reflect the purpose of our work. And I believe Dr. Shaw is here.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and Dr. Shaw, do you have a seat or do we want to?
I'm gonna set you up out here
Oh, okay.
for your PowerPoint.
We'll give them a minute to.
We're gonna do it.
In the meantime,
Yes. I think it's,
You wanna do it from there? I can do it from my laptop.
somebody, I promise somebody has it.
okay, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner Chung and fellow commissioners. I just want to say it is an honor to be here today and present to you. I will tell you, I was looking forward to this presentation for quite a bit of time, and so hopefully this will be of value to all of you. I am, as I'm sure you assume, that I'm vaccinated and boosted and tested, so I've got my mask in hand, and I'm going to try to stay as far away from people as possible, but I want to make sure everybody recognizes that we're trying to be as safe and protected as we can. So this morning, is it okay to begin, or would you like for me to?
Well, actually, I had prepared a.
Oh, please.
just to formally introduce you to the commission. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Merit Shah, MD, MPH. Dr. Shah was appointed Washington Secretary of Health in 2020. Dr. Shah earned his BA from Vanderbilt University, his MD from the University of Toledo Health Sciences Center, and completed an internal medicine residency, primary care general medicine fellowship, and MPH at the University of Texas Health Science Center. He also completed an international health policy internship at the World Health Organization headquartered in Switzerland. And for more than 20 years, Dr. Shah worked as an emergency department physician at Houston's Michael DeVahey VA Medical Center. He started his formal public health journey in 2003 as Chief Medical Officer of Galveston County's Health District before joining the frontline battle against COVID as Executive Director for Harris County Public Health. Dr. Shah has held numerous leadership positions, been a clinician, educator in the field of health, and a champion of underserved communities. He is also the first Asian American physician to serve in this leadership role for Washington State. Please welcome Dr. Shah.
Thank you. Now I can say thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. So I will go through some slides here, just really to set the tone for what's happening at the Department of Health and also what we're doing across the spectrum related to COVID and beyond COVID. And I think it's really important for us to be thinking about what is next and how do we really come across the finish line here with COVID-19. As you know, this is one of those pandemics that has refused to end. It has a long tail, and we are tail, T-A-I-L, as well as tail, T-A-L-E. And we are doing our best to continue to respond to COVID-19 as you are. I also want to thank all of you for the leadership and the support and the participation that you all provide throughout your respective communities, but also with all the people that you represent in your respective roles at the commission. It is truly one of those thankless behind the scenes positions where it's really challenging when you're doing all the work, and then whenever the negative things happen, you're the ones that are facing how do you solve those issues or challenges. So again, great to be here this morning. So with the first is just are you all able to see okay? Because I don't know. Okay, perfect. So this is one of my favorite images of Washington, just really thinking about Western Washington and the Seattle skyline, and obviously Mount Tahoma and things of that nature. But I do want to remind everybody that when we're thinking about what's happening from a Department of Health perspective, it is not just about Western Washington. And I think that is oftentimes the biggest challenge that we have, is that we're oftentimes thinking about Western Washington, the I-5 corridor, what's happening in the larger jurisdictions, but we have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that we have an entirety of the state. And when I became the health secretary, one of my comments was that I am the health secretary of health for the entirety of the state of Washington, meaning Eastern Washington, meaning Central Washington, meaning the Olympic Peninsula, meaning Southwest Washington, meaning everywhere in between. And it's large jurisdictions and small jurisdictions. It's everywhere in our communities where ultimately we have an opportunity and a responsibility to really push the health conversation. And so I wanted to make sure that that doesn't get lost as you're thinking about images, or as we present images. So oftentimes the beauty, especially when you're out of the rest of the country, people say, whoa, what's Washington? And then they see the Seattle skyline, that's what they think of. But we know in the state of Washington that it's all of us. And this pandemic has reminded us that all of us must work together in order to have the betterment of our communities in mind. When we think of health at our department, there are three cornerstone values that I have championed since being here. Governor Inslee, as you know, brought me in December of 2020. It was about 4 days after vaccines arrived in the state of Washington. It has been a blur for about a year and a half. But these cornerstone values are what we are championing at the Department of Health. They are equity, innovation, and engagement. EI. It starts with equity, it centers on equity, it ends with equity. We remain steadfast in our support of equity in all facets of what equity represents. We also want to be innovative. We want to use the tools. Well, immediately, people think the tools are what it's about. It's the technologies. And when you have all the fantastic high-tech work that's happening in the state, it's easy to think it's only about the tools. But when you think about innovation, we're thinking about creativity. We're thinking about space for people to do things, to be creative and also innovative, and to be able to push the envelope successfully. Engagement, that it's not just public health alone, it's not just the Department of Health alone, it's not just the state alone, it's all of us together. It's all the partners, our private sector partners, our healthcare partners, and as you know, right now, healthcare is going through a tremendously difficult time. Well, it's been going through a tremendously difficult time for 2.5 years, but right now specifically related to our capacity in the healthcare system. So engagement is really about all of us coming together. Most importantly, our community. It has to be mentioned that our community, Washingtonians, everyday people that are struggling and challenged by what's happening across the health spectrum in their own care, the care of their family, or the care of their neighborhood or their communities, they're absolutely where we are to focus to make sure that we're working well together. It's always good to say thank you, so I'll say it again. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our healthcare providers. Thank you to all of you from a commission standpoint that you represent. We know it is so critical to the work that we do that we have to work together. And this is my, hopefully not the only, and my hope is that this is a continued conversation of how do we work together, and we can come back and continue to discuss ways that the commission can work closer with the Department of Health. So as I mentioned, I came from Texas. I should say the commissioner mentioned that I came from Texas. I am originally from overseas Pakistan. Cincinnati's where I grew up, in the Midwest. Spent a lot of time in DC and Chicago, and then settled in Houston. And I will tell you, coming from Texas to Washington, it is a very interestingly different ecosystem. I have learned a lot in the year and a half that I've been in the position. I will tell you that the one thing that I had made mention when I became Secretary of Health was that I know public health and I know health and healthcare. What I don't know is the state of Washington. It's very clear that I needed to learn the state of Washington. What I didn't recognize was that there was this pandemic going on, and that it would require a lot of learning on the job that was happening, where you took 6 months of work and compressed it in 6 days because of just the pace of this. But what I have also seen are there themes in public health and themes in health that resonate with regardless of where you are in this nation, whether it's in a smaller community, whether it's a large. Ultimately, people are concerned about their health. They're worried about accessibility to health. Worried about the cost of healthcare. They're worried about their healthcare providers being able to provide quality care for when they need that care. And there's also an ecosystem of how, especially younger generation, but ultimately all of us as consumers are looking at the healthcare system, that it's not as much about you come to us, it's about I want you to be able to provide care or answer my questions at 2 o'clock in the morning without me showing up at the emergency department. And so we've got a real challenge on how do we really embrace the way healthcare is moving, and how do we be a part of that change and not just be on the sidelines. And so that is one thing that continues to resonate with me. The road to Washington has been an interesting one, from all the way from as Commissioner mentioned, from the 20 years of serving our nation's veterans. It's been an incredible honor. I think of the individual stories every single day as an ED physician that I heard, that I particularly heard from families, spouses of the care that was needed for veterans that were in an emergency or an acute care illness challenge. There have been large-scale emergencies as well, and so my career really goes back to Tropical Storm Allison in 2003, when Houston, as you remember, was underwater, and multiple hurricanes from Katrina, Rita, Ike, Harvey, to the point where tropical storms Eduardo, Gustav, and Dolly weren't even a blip on the radar, because we were always thinking about them. And in between H1N1, Ebola, Zika, global earthquakes in Kashmir and Haiti. And the image on the top there is from Port-au-Prince, and I remember this image of children who every morning were dancing and screaming and yelling and shouting and just so full of energy. And I remember thinking at that time, first of all, that you didn't need coffee with this group, that it was not about like you need to have a cup of java, because they got you juiced and jazzed. But it's that they also, just like all of us and all of our kids and all of our generation, next generation, that they also deserve the opportunity to have growing. No matter who you are, where you live, what you look like, what you believe in, what your ecosystem of health or politics or healthcare or whatever it is, that we all deserve the opportunity from. And that's a global phenomenon, but that's also a domestic phenomenon. It's also a state phenomenon. But that is truly what we, even regardless of where we are, that all of us must aspire to provide. Work with WHO, work with other global partners. Also reminds me of this in the bottom middle, I guess the second from the right, image, which is when I had hair, and it wasn't gray, so I actually had a little bit of hair, but it's all gray. So I asked my wife to buzz it off this last week so that I could actually be ready for summer in Washington. Is that this is during Hurricane Katrina response, and we oftentimes are looking for tools and technologies and trying to spend a lot of assets and investing resources, when oftentimes what it really is about is common sense. And so I put an official Form 214 into, it's in the record of Hurricane Katrina response at the Astrodome. We had 27,000 evacuees and another 38,000 who were brought through and settled elsewhere in Texas. That we weren't looking for new widgets, we weren't looking for new things, we were looking for common sense. When we work together, I think that all of us will agree that health, whether it's public health, healthcare, delivery, to come together makes common sense. And I think that's one of the key issues that I really believe is so important for our work moving forward. So what are the key public health challenges at the time of COVID-19? I think first and foremost, we can all say it's fighting COVID-19. It's fighting this pandemic, it's fighting this virus, it's making sure that we're not fighting each other, which is, I think, the biggest challenge that we've had in this country. It's been that we've been politicizing a pandemic. Unfortunately, fighting a pandemic has been politicized to the point where we are oftentimes tripping over each other rather than trying to, in seamless fashion, work together. The other one is, as we're fighting this pandemic, we recognize that there have been a lot of lack of investments over the decades in true health. That we have invested in health care, we have invested in what many call disease care. When you get sick, you are injured, you get to the healthcare system. How do we prevent people from getting there in the first place? How do we truly invest in the health of our communities? That true health investment in the long term is really important for us to be thinking about strategizing today and not for another moment. And the other is number 3 here, which is addressing everything else. So COVID has sucked up so much oxygen in the air that it's really tough for all of us to be able to do anything else but COVID, right? Especially in the healthcare system. But we know people with diabetes, we know people with chronic health issues, we know people with behavioral health challenges, we know people with name, fill in the blank, that they all still have those challenges, those concerns, those issues, those matters. And yet we have been really focused on COVID-19 And we've tried as a health system over time to add back in all of those other care needs that have been oftentimes put to the side, or people have not been able to get the care that they need. But we know that it has been impacted by COVID-19 and the pandemic. So in March, as you may be aware, we had asked for this look at WAP forward. What is the plan for us as a state? And we should be proud of the fact that the state has done well when it comes to COVID response. Now, you may not always get that from looking at the media or reading the stories or watching the politics, but we have. And in fact, the Commonwealth Fund just 2 weeks ago rated Washington's response number 4 in the nation, and in terms of lowest excess mortality, number 3 in the nation. That was just 2 weeks ago. This is in March, where we look at the 10 states with lowest cumulative death rates for 100,000, and we did well then. So whether it's top 3, 5, 10, doesn't matter. It's not a race to anything. We're trying to be the best that we can be as a state when it comes to our response. And we know there have been challenges. We know there have been difficulties as we have moved forward. But what we did with this WAP Forward plan was really submit what we were going to do through the end of 2022. And some people call this the endemic phase of the pandemic. I shy away from the word endemic because it has meant so many different things to so many different people. But to us, it really is about how do we continue to remind everybody that we are still in a pandemic, that masks still do matter, that it is important to get boosted. It is important to be careful about how many people are in a room when you're in a crowded environment, that people can get sick, people can get severe illness. It is so critical for us to have these continued conversations. But I dare say, and I've just been traveling, so I will tell you, you go out into the communities, a lot of people, especially depending on where you are in this state or this country or this globe, feel like this pandemic is over. We're done with it. It's over. We're finished. Thank you so much. Not even sure they're saying the thank you all the time, but we're done. So what we've been really focusing on in WAP Forward, our plan for from March through the end of this year, is really 3 buckets. One is very much about engagement and empowerment. We want to make sure that we are engaging people with information, we're giving them the awareness on how they can protect themselves. But number 2 is that giving people information is not enough. We also have to give people tools. And the tools are to empower people, you have to also, for example, at-home tests. When do you use a mask? How do you have access to a mask? Those are the kinds of tools that we have been very much focused on. It also includes ventilation. It also includes being outdoors. It includes all your other aspects of being healthy, right? Your vitamins, your sleep, your behavioral health, your spiritual health, your emotional health. It is all of that coming together. But we want to make sure people have tools, they have the access to those tools, but they also know when and how to use those tools. And finally, while there are many things that we want people to be doing themselves, we have a responsibility as a state behind the scenes, our system readiness, our capacity, our support of the healthcare system, or the entirety of the ecosystem of what it needs to respond to COVID-19. We've had a lot of shared successes. I won't really go through these in detail, but I will tell you that some of these really are very much driven by a notion of what was in the moment, what we were anticipating, and how do we need to put things forward. So where it's Care Connect, social needs to help people through difficult times, Caravan, first time Department of Health at the state level had a resource of on wheels, if you will, mobility, where we could go to communities oftentimes that didn't have access to vaccines, and we could actually provide those vaccines. our VAC Center, which, as you know, is very much about the public-private partnership. And so as we were setting up our mass vaccination sites, Starbucks said, look, we can get a latte in your hand 30% faster. Sure, we can help get a little bit on their efficiency when it comes to mass vaccination, and they were right, they could. But also the other private sector, large and small, working together. Our fix, which was not just about the private sector, but this was about our equity-driven, over 600 organizations and individuals that were representing so many communities in our larger Washington ecosystem coming together and making sure that we were hearing from community, we were listening to voices, and ultimately that we were driving equity and making sure equity was driving our work and vice versa. WA Notify, WA Verify notification app where you could, your Bluetooth could notify you if you were exposed to COVID-19, and WA Verify, a way for you to be able to actually take a QR code and be able to show it digitally on your app. And in fact, I just had an opportunity to present that in Spain this last week on how do we really utilize this digital certification piece as an option. The power providers, I know many of you were a part of this, so thank you for doing that. Just coming together and saying, look, I champion vaccines and I want my patients to know that vaccines are important. And we had such an incredible amount of communications that came with that, but also so many providers who came together who helped us champion that message. And then finally, say yes to COVID tests, which, as you know, was what I find really amazing. Again, working with some of our private sector partners, is that somebody could order a COVID test today, and the next day it's in their mailbox. They were shocked. That was like one of the best social media, Twitter messages that we received were when people said, oh my gosh, government, the next day got us our tests. That was a good feeling, because usually when you're opening up social media, it's usually not that kind of exciting. So I'll end with just a few other things to just make mention. One is, we know that misinformation and disinformation has been a challenge. We know that vaccine confidence has been a challenge. We know that politicizing this pandemic has been a challenge. We know all of this, but the question isn't that we know it. The question is, what do we do to address it? And we have taken some very aggressive steps, again, under Governor Inslee's leadership, under his team's leadership, under Department of Health leadership at our agency and our sister agencies across the state, to say that we really believe that people have a right to have the right information, accurate information to make informed decisions on what they want to do. And that's been a national effort and also a global effort that we've been a part of. It took a pandemic to show how vital it is to invest in public health. And this is sad, because I testified in Congress many times prior to the pandemic to say, please invest in public health. We are the offensive line of a football team. Everybody focuses on the quarterback, the healthcare system. And I love all of you, because I'm part of all of you, right? I'm a healthcare provider. But I also know that it's about prevention. It's about how do we invest in community? How do we invest in people? And we have done far little of that in this country, with 96 cents of every dollar is going into healthcare delivery of a health dollar, rather than a more balanced approach to how you get health and healthcare. So this pandemic will end eventually. I can't tell you exactly when. My crystal ball has become fuzzier by the day. But what I will say is that there are two ways to see it end. One, and again, both will see this pandemic end. One is transactional. And I say this a lot, respectfully, that this is really where we, well, it's like a transaction at a cash register at a supermarket. That you get a good and you pay for the good and you walk out of the store. It's a transaction. So we can see this pandemic end in a transactional way. One and done, we kind of do this, we wipe our hands, we go to what we as Americans are really good at, it's the next shiny object, the next headline, we say we're done. And I think many of you can argue right now that that is what is happening, right? And people are like, we're done. But the other is to be transformational. And And transformational implies that it's not just about what it took for us to get through this pandemic, but it's taking all the pluses, all the minuses, all the positives, all the negatives, especially the inequities that were identified and exacerbated during this pandemic, and to truly transform them. So we can be transactional, we're done, we move on. Or we can be transformational and think about the ecosystem of what we have learned during this pandemic and how can we do better, and how do we invest in those very systems that need the investment in order for us to really fully transform health. The choice is ours. And the question is, which choice are we going to make as a society? And this is for beyond the commission. This is beyond the Department of Health. This is beyond the state. This is a societal question. And I will make this editorial comment. I already feel like the, as they say, sands in the hourglass that's already slipping. So let me just close with this last slide to say it takes a village, and hashtag in it together. I can't say enough about our department leaders. These are amazing individuals with an incredible diversity of both experiences and talent who come in. I know that you've worked very closely with our Health Systems Quality Assurance HSQA group on an everyday basis. Second from the left right next to me is Lacey Fahrenbach. She's our Deputy Secretary for our new Office of Prevention, Safety, and Health. And Lacey oversees HSQA, so just wanted to point her out, as well as on the right, Dr. Tao Kwan Yet, who is our Chief Science Officer, who was brought, I want to say this past year, we brought him in to lead our science and health and medical efforts. And so the two of them, I just point them out, but I would point out all of our incredible leaders, because ultimately it's a village to work together. So looking forward to working with you. I hope this helps a bit to paint some of the picture of where we are. I did want to make one last comment, which is we are in the midst of finalizing our strategic priorities. And our strategic priorities are very much as a department of what is our North Star of looking ahead, and also what are some of the things that we may or may not be able to focus as much on. We know it's going to include health and wellness, the true ecosystem of truth. What does it mean to be healthy? Physical health, nutritional health, behavioral, emotional health, et cetera. But it's also going to be environmental health. It's going to include the system's capacity and the investment that's required, emergency response and resiliency, and finally, global health and One Health, a real nod towards why global domestic health are here. So with that, we're right at time, and I will stop.
Just kind of shake. Thank you so much. Do you have any time for?
I do.
Yeah. My news.
Yeah, microphone, that's all.
We might have time for one or two questions for Dr. Shaw. Anybody have a question? Yes.
So, yeah, I have an interest in policy, and I'm curious to know if we're coming from the healthcare provider standpoint. And I wanted to know what sort of things do you think we should be thinking about in terms of healthcare and health of the state of, people in the state of Washington, and if we're thinking of a few things that we might focus on as policy issues. And also, thanks, it was a great talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things that the commission can do is to help advocate for the real partnership between healthcare and public health, or healthcare and population health. And so, as you know, when healthcare speaks of population health, we're oftentimes thinking about our patients, lives covered, the people that are coming to our clinical system, and we're not always thinking about true population health of the entirety of a community, even if they're not ours, for example, even if they're not our veterans, or if they're not our clients or individuals or patients. And so I think this real bringing together of healthcare and public health is really what I would champion mostly. The other is advocacy. As much as you can, and I know there are some limitations as part of the commission, but it is important that when legislatures meet, they meet to advocate and to change law and to make systems work better together. So as you identify things, again, transactional, transformational, during this pandemic that didn't work so well, this is the time to be able to think about how do we improve on those? How do we enhance those? How do we work together to address those? So one is the communication, the other is the advocacy, and then the third is, this is a really hard one, but it's how do we get a population health perspective to the very providers who you serve, who you represent. I can't tell you how many times I've had this situation where I was in the emergency department and I was thinking, if I keep my healthcare provider hat on, this is how I would act. But if I put my population health hat on, I would be thinking about this very differently, whether it came to cost, whether it came to the kinds of tests we were ordering, how many of those tests we were ordering. And oftentimes healthcare providers are thinking, rightfully so, of just the individual in front of them or the situation in front of them. But really having a population health perspective is very difficult to do when you're in the midst of somebody in front of you who's got a blood pressure issue or who has a behavioral health issue. So thinking about ways that we can continue to champion for that healthcare provider or the healthcare system, how to keep that perspective in mind as well. Those three are probably, that's a big homework assignment right there, just those three. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the pandemic itself, right? Because we're still in the midst of, we don't know all the, where variants are going. We don't know what boosters are going to look like in the fall. We don't, some of my colleagues in the public health system are very much talking about the fall is going to be bad. And what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we continue to articulate to our patients and those around us that, look, make sure you think about your safety and health and those around you, and not think that it's over. So I think there's this aspect of the pandemic fatigue that we want to make sure we address. And then the final is just a transformation about how do we look at the systems and how do we continue to work together. And the commission and all of the health agencies, Department of Health, Healthcare Authority, DSHS, DC Lab, all the other agencies that are there, and how do we work together so that we can have a better Washington for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I know you've been totally focused on COVID since you came to the state of Washington, but I would like to ask about kind of the bigger picture, more long-term perspective, which you mentioned we're a disease treatment system, and what we really need to be is a health promotion system. And when I think about the excess morbidity and mortality, COVID pales in comparison to behavioral lifestyle sort of factors, right? So just from the state of Washington point of view, I thought it was interesting that we passed a tax to provide long-term care for people, right? That all started in January, I think. And I thought to myself, long-term care, that's important, but free gym memberships, addressing food deserts, addressing lack of mental health and substance abuse counselors, there's so many other things that feel to me like would have contributed to prevention and public health benefit in the long term in a bigger way than the $27,000 per person that maybe our healthcare long-term care tax will provide. And I'm wondering if you can just comment on the strategic kind of long-term point of view of public health in the state of Washington going forward in those perspectives. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Curry. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is really about how do we think about the strategic nature of the work that we're doing. Those 5 priorities, which again have not been finalized, have not been released, I just gave a flavor of it. That first around health and wellness really speaks exactly to what you're speaking to, which is that we have to be not just thinking about healthcare. We can't just be thinking about the pandemic. We have to really be thinking about the entirety of a holistic look at what does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be well? What does it mean to be resilient? What does it mean to be strong when it comes to community and community members? That starts with the community being strong, right? So the investment, which is not just health investments, this is all about the social determinants of health. When we know that when we invest in transportation and housing and education and poverty eradication, that very much has a downstream health impact. So we want to make sure that we're investing there. So we're working with those partners, not just the sister agencies at the state level, the cabinet level, but also private sector, and also partners and community-based organizations and communities that very much are every day dealing and challenged by those very issues. So there is that aspect of social determinants of health and all the investments that are going in there. But further in the health and wellness area is very much about physical health, nutritional health, and also that emotional and behavioral health. So the 988 hotline, the launch that's about to happen in the next couple of days, what we're really looking at doing is that we have an approach to how do we raise the awareness of suicide prevention? How do we raise the awareness of behavioral health? We know there are going to be a number of issues that are coming down the pipe, whether it's reproductive health is a recent decisions, whether it's how do we take on monkeypox? Now we've had increases in cases in our state, right? How do we continue to fight a pandemic while we're also recognizing that still diabetes is happening, people are still having heart disease, and they're still needing the necessity to go to a healthcare system. So there is a complex way of looking at it, but we put it into the category of health and wellness. That truly when we're looking at health and wellness, we have to have communities that are healthy, we have to have communities that are invested in, and that includes food deserts, that includes trying to eradicate those kinds of conditions that ultimately are promoting ill health rather than promoting positive good health. And so that's absolutely where we're going. But the one area that we'll submit that's been really challenging for Department of Health as I've come in is we're not good at our stop agenda. So what Department of Health has done, what CDC has done, what many agencies across the country have done, is ultimately that we get funding and we go move towards an issue, and we take it on. But either the issue has gone away or the funding has gone away, or it's maybe not as much of a priority, but we continue to not let that program go. And that stop agenda is really challenging in leadership, because ultimately we then we want to do everything to make sure that we're honoring the program that's there. But sometimes that may mean that program may need to sunset, or that activity may need to transition, or we may need to be thinking differently about it. One of the focus areas that I've asked our team to look at is rural health. We know that oftentimes in our larger jurisdictions and communities, the resources are there. Now, by the way, they're still not there, because per capita, the resources aren't there. But we know that in many of those smaller rural jurisdictions in our state, that when you have one healthcare provider, or you have one critical access hospital, or you have to drive 100 miles to be able to get to an emergency visit or a quality emergency care visit, that's a problem. And we are really focused on how do we continue to look at rural health in a way that's different than how we usually look at the system, which is a monolith care provision. So I know I incompletely answered your question, but these 5 priority areas are really our North Star to help us get to exactly where you're referring. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we could easily spend an hour or more asking you questions, but I do want to respect your time and time of the commission. So really appreciate you being here and visiting us, and we might actually have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and again, thank you for.
Well, just for everyone's information, I think we will likely run a little bit over, but we'll try to get through our agenda items because we can. Any other reports from the work groups or committees? Thank you. Next will be the rulemaking activities. Amelia?
So I do have one announcement, which is about item 4 on the rules progress report. The IMG, it's for the IMG, the International Medical Graduates Rulemaking that we're working on, the CR 102, which is the second step in the rulemaking process. Filed yesterday, and we will have a rules hearing on that subject during your next commission meeting. So we have it scheduled for 8:30, so since that is also an open public meeting, then we'll have to start the hearing at that time. So your August business meeting will probably run a little longer than usual, and I have worked with compliance to reschedule some of the personal appearances to accommodate for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item are the bylaws. The amended revised bylaws in its final draft is included in your packet. Are there any questions or discussions on the bylaws? And remind me, since we had a transition since the last time we discussed this, does this need to be approved by this meeting, at this meeting? Okay, thank you. I didn't remember the timeline for that. So can we have a motion to approve the bylaws as put it in your packet? Second. Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand or say aye. Opposed? None opposed. The bylaws are, the motion is, motion carries and the bylaws are accepted. Next card is the list and labels request. Part.
Yeah, so just for the new members, when the commission gets a public records request for a list of, we say list of labels, we used to send out mailing labels, I don't think they do that anymore. But when they request a list of your providers, MDs and PAs for a commercial purpose, they can only get that list if they are either an educational association or a professional association. So these requests come to you to actually approve the group as either professional association or educational organization. So that is what you're looking at. So the first is the lead continuing education. They, I believe, do meet the requirements for educational organization. I would recommend.
I looked at their website and I didn't see anything for MTs or PAs, and it just looked like, I don't know, it looked like, I don't know, I was skeptical.
So you can ask for more information if you'd like to do that instead, and ask them to provide materials.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't select a state, you couldn't select a profession that was anything related to us. I thought it was a little bit of that, so I would absolutely request more information before we grant that.
Thank you. We'll table that item.
I think you can direct Amelia to reach back out to them.
Okay. We'll bring that back. We won't need a motion for that. Next item.
The next is Kentucky County Public Health. I don't necessarily think they are using it for a commercial purpose, but somehow it made its way into this process. But I would recommend, I believe they would meet the definition, Kentucky County Public Health, which are they're sending out alerts for public health emergencies.
Can we have a motion to approve? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed?
And the last is the Hatch Cancer Center. They've been previously approved for PAs, and now they're asking for the MD list. If they were approved, they should be approved for both. Again, I don't know why Public Records Center is sending these back to you because you approved the organization, not the request, but they need another approval. I would recommend approving.
You have a motion? Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed? None opposed. And those two are approved. We'll bring back the elite continuing education for the next meeting. Next item is policy committee. Lynn?
We had a pretty straightforward policy committee meeting last night. I think Mike was feeling bad for me for my first meeting, so we had light it. But I hope everybody had an opportunity to take a look at these before this morning. I'm going to start with the overlapping and simultaneous elective surgeries because there was a change made at the committee meeting yesterday. And you can find that in your packet on page 1 for general principles. Guidance number 4. Making sure that the active attending surgeon is available as needed. And then the other changes you can see as noted on this policy. Does anybody have any additional comments or questions?
Oh, Mr. Carroll?
Dr. Domino got that. Dr. Domino and Dr. View both sent me comments that maybe you want to address.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's very good document. It really addressed the, thank you. I think it's a very good document and we support it. The only thing I have is about this issue about, I think it's under item number 4, under the guidance, is that prior to beginning the procedure, a backup attending surgeon should be identified. And I don't know what is the timing that the committee has in mind. To me, if you read it, it's a backup attending is something unexpected happen, and then prior surgery, the surgeon identifies the person. I guess this happened, but what I'm a little concerned or not clear about under item B, informed consent, which is that patients should be informed who participate in surgery, including residents, fellows, physician assistants, nursing practitioners, basically whoever is there. If the backup surgeon is going to be as a primary surgeon, and I'm not sure if a patient would get enough time to be informed, and that seems like I don't know how to think about this, resolve this. The idea to inform patients is to let them know that who might be my backup, and I would, let the patient know. But prior to the surgery, sometimes patients being reeled into the surgery, they may not, sometimes even already had the anesthesia injection. They may not clearly have read before the surgery. So I just, my point is whether that would provide enough time to get patients to be informed about who will be the primary surgeon in this situation.
It looks like it's part of the informed consent, Dr. Yu. They would sign.
Right, that issue is about the timing, the under item 4, prior to beginning surgery, a backup attending surgeon should be identified. That's the very short time window. I'm not sure that's gave the patient enough time to go to the informed consent, item 1. And number 3, I talked to Mike, and he said whether, number 3 would cover, but number 3 to me, that is not cover the situation as a backup for something happened up, so that is my comment.
I have a comment about it. So there are certain specialties that have long prep times. So generally, some of the orthopedic orthopedic cases, spine surgeries, and craniotomies and neurosurgery procedures. And the attending will often run 2 rooms. And what the thing about it is that, and I've seen, I mean, they do identify who, if they are in another room, that the attending surgeon will be there for the critical point of the procedure. That's not the positioning of the patient, making sure their imaging equipment's there, doing the prep and the initial approach. But on occasion, and it's rare, there's been a situation where they're in the other case doing their critical portion when an emergency, a surgical emergency rises in that other room. And it is important, it's part of our timeout procedures that we have. It's a discussion beforehand, and it is discussed with the patients, at least I know our surgeons do, because I've heard them do it in pre-op before they're sedated or anything, about who you contact. I mean, we in anesthesia, we run multiple rooms if we work in a care team model, but we have someone who everyone knows can contact if we're tied up in an emergency. And similarly for these surgeons. So the specialties that do that, not all, as I said, it tends to be those that have an hour prep or 2-hour prep, right, early to get in. So that, I don't know, to me it seemed clear, but that's why I added immediately before surgery, because what you don't want to happen, and I've been in that circumstance, is that, say, the fellow runs into a problem and there's massive bleeding and the attending surgeon is under a microscope in a critical point in a case and cannot leave. And then it's like, well, who should I call? And then you're paging all these other people. So that's why I suggested adding in before the procedure starts. It should be in that timeout procedure, and someone should be prearranged. And our surgeons tell them that.
Yeah, I definitely understand, appreciate, the circumstances happen. And I have no objection or problem putting in that sentence in there because it does happen. What I'm thinking is whether this identifying somebody would be as a backup in case of emergency should happen early, to anticipating that something happens, so that that information could be provided to the patient. The patient will know under emergency, Dr. B is going to do the primary surgery. That's all I'm saying. I have no problem with that, kind of sentence there. Yeah, appreciate your clarification on that. I'm not certain, so I'm just thinking about from patients' perspective. If somebody emergency come up, someone to know. I would like to know.
Dr. Yu, are you suggesting any amendments to what you're seeing?
Well, the only thing, I'm not good at words this. I don't know y'all, type and whatever. I just identify probably early, so that wouldn't let patients, or even informed consent part would say the backup attending physician will be informed, will be informed to patient, something like that. Still keep the prior surgery.
Right. I think I'm going to speak as a surgeon for a second, and I think I'm understanding what your question is. What you're saying is that beyond just saying this is the person who's going to take over in case of an emergency, you want the patient to have more time to know who that person is. And I would say that ideally, maybe that's something that could be addressed in the workflow, but if your concern is that, as a patient, you won't find out until just before surgery that who this person is, you don't know who that person is. Not sure if you can trust that person, et cetera. That's a concern. I think your concern is valid, but I think from a standpoint, it's approaching the limit of how much one can actually expect, because that can happen anytime. And even in the non-overlapping surgeries, a surgeon could have a heart attack. And I'm not trying to be ridiculous. Things could happen, or other emergencies could happen where where somebody else has to take over. We can't always anticipate that and have the patient meet that person ahead of time and have discussions, et cetera. At least that's how I'm understanding it.
Yeah.
Because the fact that someone else may have to take over is stated in the policy. I think your concern is that it's not enough time for the patient to get to know that person.
Yeah.
It's a practice.
Yeah.
That actually.
But the sentence added that prior to beginning surgery, a back-to-beginning surgeon should be identified. That means the surgeon has prior knowledge that someone, before you enroll the patient into the surgery, the surgeon, primary surgeon has prior knowledge who's going to be my back. He doesn't anticipate I'm going to have a heart attack. He do a catastrophic thing. So that had a lead time for the attending physician to think about who's going to replace me. I'm just saying that the information should relate to the patient who got to be real in the surgery. Mike, you got something to say?
But Dr. Yu talked to me before the meeting, and so I was looking at B #1, where it talks about informed consent and informing the patient. I thought, if you want to identify the back surgeon, you could add the words at the very end, and the identity of the back surgeon. If you think that's reasonable to make that part of informed consent, if you know I can plan.
If you have a time to do identify, certainly if you have a certain that I have heart attack, I just don't have time to do it. Reasonable patients would understand. We had a complaint some time ago, a complainant about the surgeon changed to someone else without letting know. But the rationale is that we have no choice or something like that. But, it's medical care is communication. The better you communicate, let people know, the better you reduce anything it's fine.
Right, okay, well, I was under the impression that in B1 and 3, that included that individual, but if you're saying that it should be explicitly included, that could be considered. Dr. Trescott?
I'm not a surgeon, but my concern is adding some requirement that adds complexity to starting an operation in the OR. And if we put it in those kind of words, again, it's just adding work, and I'm not sure it's necessary. And also in smaller facilities, smaller hospitals, more rural hospitals, it may be difficult to be that specific before the procedure. So I would not want to add putting that specifically in there.
Well, you could.
So I guess in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Dr. Yu that if you have any suggestions that you want to add, that we can submit that. But I guess we do have to vote on this particular.
Do you want to defer?
Could I just say one word first, please? You couldn't just say, if you are already identified, let patient know. If you have not identified, because on something you can anticipate, of course, nobody can expect you to do it. So, but this sentence means you already have someone in mind. So that's okay. I'm
I
down.
just think that if you put it in there, some compliance officer will think it has to be done before every procedure. So even though, of course, you don't have to do it, that doesn't necessarily translate out there. Could we just defer this one?
Sure.
Explain, do we have other policies?
We do. The other policy is professionalism and electronic media. If you had a chance to take a look at the few changes that were made, does anybody have any additional questions or concerns about this one? As you can see on page 1, there were some, you have it in front of you, a few minor changes made. Page 2.
Are there any questions to the document?
I thought it was a good policy, but I wish I had presented an addendum that showed all of the examples of when people have done something and gotten in trouble. So like examples that if, you know, if a doctor was looking at something, they can say, oh, here's like 5 cases. Sometimes when you're teaching how to stay out of trouble, it helps to give examples of when people could get in trouble, when they were, that may have seemed innocent and then landed in hot water. So I don't think it needs to be part of the policy, but maybe like a little bit to help illustrate the points. Other people would find that helpful.
Dr. Courage, you made the sides what's on page 3 and 4, where there's some
But I can say,
principles and examples.
In the back of the page 58, PDF.
yeah, I did see those. I guess I was thinking more along with, okay, maybe that's not. I was sort of pushing for cases, but yeah. You guys are okay.
Any other questions? So approve this one as presented with changes as noted.
So just as an FYI, the commission does not, these items that come out of the policy committee don't need a proper motion and second, because by having this way presented, that is the motion and second is coming from the committee, so we can just directly vote on it.
The last item is the interpretive statement.
So
We can vote on it, so we can either vote on it or we can vote on it as a report. Yeah,
All right, thank you. So the last is the interpretive statement. Position DA's use of DEA waiver from buprenorphine. Has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at that one? Are there any comments or additional questions with this one? If not, then I request that the report be accepted as presented.
All in favor of the report being accepted, please say aye.
Aye.
With the deferral.
Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. The policy committee report is accepted. We will bring back the simultaneously distributed for the next meeting. Member reports. I know we are running out of time, but I do want to give adequate time for some of our newer commissioners if they would like to provide just a quick, yes, Ms. Boyd.
We did skip one item. Do we want to defer that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware.
No worries. It was 7:08. 7:25. It was Heather's approval of meetings act. Defer that for the next meeting. Yeah. Thank you.
That will be deferred. Member reports. Are there any member reports? If none, I'm going to just invite some of our newer members just to give themselves an introduction to us and tell us. Again, I apologize for the lack of time, but maybe if you could just spend 1 minute telling us about it. Mr. Bailey?
You can pull it a little closer.
It won't break.
Yeah.
So good morning, everybody. So as far as background, Seattle, providing service delivery, population, not just within the city, but within the county as well. I myself am relatively new to Washington. Love the fact that there's no here, but has been somewhat of a culture change. I spent the majority of my life in the East Coast, background ranges predominantly in public health. Had the opportunity to work on for trustees for the hospital, and then also on the licensing board for professional counselors and drug and alcohol addiction specialists. So very happy to be here, very happy to contribute, and once again, loving the life of the community and it's beautiful weather here in Washington.
Thank you. Dr. Chen?
good morning, everybody. My name is Poshin Chang. I'm a physician. I work at for kinds of but which is like a basic program, but we have office in Longview. So that's where I'm working and I've been there for 25 years. My background is like I have public health background, and also public health degree, and then also I'm actually working as a patient safety officer. So basically, my interest is patient safety. So basically, that's what the background is.
Great, thank you for being here. Mr. Poland?
My name is Robert Douglas Bullitt. I have no health background. My wife is a nurse, retired. I have a bachelor's degree in public business administration from Seattle University, and a master's degree in public health, public administration from the University of Washington. I got those back in 1975. Been sitting around the house going local, walking my dog. This might be an opportunity to give back to the state of Washington. So my expertise and knowledge.
Thank you very much. Still?
Good morning, my name is Ed Lopez, I'm a PA. In October, I'll be 40 years of practice. I am semi-retired, spent the first part of my career, 20 years in cardiac surgery here in the Seattle, Tacoma area. Returned to school and then had the privilege of being one of the co-founders of which is now the Virginia Mason Franciscan Hospitalist Program, and then retired in administration in the Franciscan Health System, and now reside in Eastern Washington, Richland, with a group who does primarily occupational health, as well as prison health. And my expertise has been focusing on working with the migrant seasonal farm worker community, trying to pay back the many years that I have squandered in giving back to my community.
Thank you as well. Any other member reports? Not forgetting anybody. Thank you. Staff report. Mr. Matthews?
So just as an addendum to my written report, number one, thank you for passing the bylaws. As I was telling Melanie, it's been like a 2-year labor of love for me, so I'm glad to have it on my plate now. Just as an FYI, the Uniform Laws Committee is a national group that creates uniform law. And they've created about 600 pieces of uniform legislation that are intended by states to be passed so that they have common processes or definitions. And I give you that background to say that on the 13th of this month, they passed a uniform law on telehealth. You're going to be seeing this because the chair of the drafting committee was a Seattle defense attorney named Michelle Rovich, and she's worked with a very large law firm there. So there's going to be an expectation that Washington join this. It's got some good pieces. It's got some pieces that I'm not sure how the commission's going to respond. Number one, it does create some common definitions for telehealth. It also creates some exemptions that you're used to in your telehealth policy for licensure. And that is peer-to-peer consultation, specialty, second opinion, that kind of thing. The big ask is that it creates a registration system based off of if you have an unencumbered license out of state, you can get registered here and come on in. I was an observer on the drafting committee, and there was a strong misunderstanding of what a registration system could possibly be. Number one, in Washington State. Number two, physician systems. There was an expectation that if you just sent in your name, rank, serial number, and a fee, you would get registered. And we regulators in the room were like, no way. Just from a case law perspective, that's not going to happen because it's a property right in Washington State. But also, I don't think anyone's comfortable just giving a license to a physician or physician assistant without some form. So that's coming. We should likely see that, as I said, it was finalized at the meeting on the 13th. We should expect to see that in the 2023 session And we will certainly be reaching out to our legislative committee to get an opinion. We may be bringing our analysis to this full commission for some review and ask for guidance on it, because this is a new concept. It's sort of the reverse compact, where it's intended to be passed by a single state, not by all other states, as a uniform thing. So that should be coming. The other thing I wanted to let you know is, as a follow-up from what Marissa presented yesterday for Lunch and Learn, I just wanted to give you an idea of the increase in the numbers on licensing applications. So for fiscal year 2019, licensing issued 2,743 licenses. There are 243 of those were compact licenses. Fiscal year 2020, 3,352, 320 of those were compact. Fiscal year 2021, 3,652, 372 of those were compact. And as of July 1st of this year, 4,635, 462 were compact licenses. So you can see over 4 years, we are increasing quite a bit with respect to interest. Some of that is pandemic, where people came in on the volunteer healthcare practitioner program, and then they converted and used the compact to switch over, or they just went for the full license. Quite a few of those are from OHSU, some. So that's the end.
Thank you. Any other staff report?
Hi, I'm the chief investigator. We've got a new employee at one of the duties. He's our healthcare investigator, Jeff Kinsler. You want to give him background?
Sure. Good morning. First, I want to thank Adam and Frida and the executive for having me here. Come forward. I look forward to working with everyone. I'll give you a truncated version of my background in some time, but I'm a graduate from the University of California, Davis. I have a background in legal, law, and healthcare. And I don't do well with mics, so let's give it a shot there. But no, I'm looking forward to working with everyone, and if anyone has any questions, Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other staff report? Thank you. Ms. Carter, do you have a final word? Thank you very much. This concludes the business meeting. I just have a couple of final maybe housekeeping type words. So I know that we went overtime today because we had a special guest. And so I appreciate all of you accommodating the change in our schedule. As you know, we will have our first respondents, or maybe even second respondents, sitting outside. And I know you're going to hear this from me probably for the duration of my tenure on the chair, but I do feel that it's very important in terms of how we appear to the public, and especially those who are here for, in their mind, a very serious business. I would like to just request that while we are in the presence of the respondents who are here, that we keep a professional demeanor. That is, like, don't stand outside and chat and laugh about your, latest vacation, that kind of thing. And I apologize if that just doesn't seem like it's a nice, way to think about it, but I do feel that that is an important thing to do. So just keep that in mind, and also remember to take your nameplate with you, because you'll need that in your room. And thank you again for being here. I know it's really tough to transition to a in-person meeting again, especially for those of you who really have spent most of your commission membership online, but this is, I think, it's a very important way for us to conduct our business. So thank you again for being here. Let's finish off the weekend. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.